joining in. My name is Ian Ballantyne. I'm the Director of Marketing at Sports Basement. On the call today, we've got Matt Bach, Director of Endurance Athletics at UCan, and world-renowned running coach Greg McMillan, which is awesome that he's here joining us. Matt's going to take the lead on kind of directing the conversation. So Matt, I'll go ahead and let you take the lead from here. I'll let the people kind of chime in. The ask of all the participants, just make sure you're muting your mics. And then after we have the sort of agenda run of show with Greg, we'll open the platform for a Q&A and have a little raffle post-event. So thank you. Floor is yours, Matt.
Excellent. Thank you, Ian. And thank you for putting together this live event with such an awesome guest. So Greg is a tremendous coach. One of the things I love the best about Greg is his ability to take something that's really complex and make it seem so clear and so simple. So I'm excited to dive right in and glean some knowledge from you, Greg. First, a quick preview. Actually, Ian kind of gave a little bit of a preview already, but I'm going to be asking Greg some questions about how to build fitness the right way, some common mistakes that runners make, and how we might adjust and adapt given this unique environment that we're in right now. And then we'll open it up to Q&A from all of you so that you can ask all the questions, and we're going to be sure to leave plenty of time for those questions. So, and then we'll close it out with a raffle and a couple of deals. So let's dive right in. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So Greg is a world-class running coach, absolutely fantastic. And people often talk about patience when it comes to running. We runners can be an overzealous bunch. Regardless of whether I'm a new runner or a runner looking to take it to the next level, is there advice that you can give to athletes when it comes to starting up a new program?
Yeah, I think the big lesson is that you have to advance a little bit slower and more patiently than you wish, right? Because one of the things we know is that, when you first start a run walk program or a running program, it's pretty tough. You breathe really heavy. You've got a lot of those sort of fatiguing messages coming in on your brain to stop doing this. Why are you doing this? But after a few runs or run walks or walks even, you start to feel better and better. So the cardiovascular system and even the mental system starts to go, okay, you're going to do this to me. I'm going to adapt. I'll be able to better handle this for the next time out the door. And one of the things that's interesting about that adaptation rate is that the cardiovascular system over just 3 or 4 weeks will really adapt, and you'll find that you're not breathing as hard. It doesn't feel as difficult to go out and sort of go around the block a few times. And the same thing mentally. All of a sudden, you're able to kind of handle that workload where you're not getting so many of the fatiguing messages, the stop doing this messages from the brain. And so what that encourages you to do, of course, is that you go farther and you go faster, and you love that, and you start to get even fitter, and those adaptations continue. But the musculoskeletal system, the muscles, the tendons, the bones, the ligaments, the fascia, all of that component, that system in the body takes longer to adapt when you begin a running program than the cardiovascular and the mental system. So while you're physically starting to feel better, your breathing is more under control, you can go faster, you can go farther, and mentally you're loving it and you don't have so many of those fatiguing messages, the musculoskeletal system is not adapting as fast. So that's why coaches are always saying, listen to your body, be patient, let's advance a little bit slower than you wish you could. So stay at that same level for 1 or 2 more weeks before you advance to the next level. That gives that musculoskeletal system a little time to catch up. That way we avoid those injuries that we see in new runners that happen after 1, 2, 3 months of becoming active, because they just develop this engine, this sort of cardiovascular system in this brain that wants to push and can push. But that musculoskeletal system, kind of that chassis of our body, if we use the car analogy, it can't quite keep up. So that's why when I'm working with new runners, I'm really focused in the beginning on, let's just get out the door. Let's find a sustainable routine that can work into your life schedule. Let's not worry about going fast or far right now. And that gives them the patience to let that musculoskeletal system kind of catch up and adapt in a way that it's strong enough to handle what their engine is now able to do for them.
I could totally relate to that because I've been running for a long time, but anytime I take a break and then I come back, I always notice, yeah, like exactly as you said, after about a few weeks, my aerobic system seems to be there, but my Achilles, my knees, things seem to be creaking a little bit. And, and those things definitely, they definitely take a long time, a lot
Yeah,
longer than that
there's a
cardiovascular system.
discrepancy, right? There's about a
Yeah.
25 to 50% discrepancy. So that musculoskeletal system just is slower to adapt. So you need 25 to 50% more time for it to be able to handle what your cardiovascular system can do. It's just part of how we adapt to training. And that's why if you're just patient with it, and as coaches, that's why we're holding athletes back to get them through that period of time. Then that body is ready to do what sort of the cardiovascular system can deliver.
Do you have some sort of rule of thumb that you tend to use? Like I think I've heard before something like, don't increase by more than 10% for your long run each week or your mileage each week. Is there something like that you kind of typically abide by?
There can be the 10% rule. It's a little bit tough if you're getting started, right? Because it'll take you forever to kind of build up. I kind of like the don't advance more than 5 or 10 minutes on any exercise session too quickly. So that's a jump 5 to 10 minutes for the next session, maybe the following week or the week after. The body can usually handle. But a lot of times we do 10%, 20%, 30% more because we get fit. So I think that's one rule of thumb that you can use. The other is to take down weeks. So cycle your volume up and down. So if you have somebody, they can maybe build up for 1 or 2 weeks, advancing their training. But then on the third week, take a step back and go back to your original training load from 2 weeks before. That sort of cycling of these sort of up weeks and then that down week, that seems to give that musculoskeletal system time to adapt. I've been using that for a number of years with runners, not just new runners, but all the way up to the Olympians that I've coached. And it works really well at keeping injuries at bay. So it kind of forces you to stall doing too much too soon because you give that musculoskeletal system a break. So I think whether you use the 10% rule or you use the 5 to 10 minutes per exercise rule, whatever it is, every third week right now when you're beginning, take that step back week. You won't want to do it because you'll be feeling good and you'll want to sort of keep advancing. But again, we'll give that musculoskeletal system time to advance. Once you get more experienced as a runner, you can often move to 3 weeks up and 1 week down. That's a good rhythm for more experienced runners. But again, we just have to keep the musculoskeletal system happy. And if it is, we know all those other adaptations are fairly easy to get. It's the interruption in training because we injure our musculoskeletal system. If you start to feel any tightness, any aches, any pains, that's a red flag. That's your body saying, I'm not adapting fast enough. I'm not recovering fast enough from what you're asking me to do. So take it a little bit easier on me. Usually if you insert those down weeks, you can take care of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all excellent tips. Now, what are some other, one of these mistakes that a lot of runners make is kind of ramping up too fast, but what are some of the other common mistakes that, you've dealt with so many runners, hundreds or thousands of runners over the years. So what are some of the other common mistakes that you've come across?
I think one of the ones is that they have a routine that they're trying to do that's not sustainable. So it's almost like New Year's resolutions, right? Somebody's not done a single push-up the entire year before and they say, I'm going to do 20 push-ups a day. It's like, well, why don't you do 5 push-ups 3 days a week and let's settle into that. So I feel like with a lot of people when they start, because running and walking is so easy to do, right? You can just put on your shoes and go out the door and do it. It's very easy to kind of set yourself up with a routine that's not really sustainable. It's got to be something that can fit in your life so you can kind of keep it going. That way you kind of will live through once life gets busy, you'll have a routine that kind of can fit in that busy life. So I think the too much too soon, the unsustainable routine is another common issue. And then worrying too much about getting a really hard workout in to really burn a lot of calories and all that. Like I said, in the beginning, we're not going to worry about that. We're just trying to have a consistent routine, let that body kind of develop, adapt, and then you can get more focused on how fast you're going, how you compare to other people, either in your neighborhood, in your training group, or online that you see their results. You're not comparing them yet. You're sort of just focused on yourself. If you can get through that first month or two with a nice sustainable routine and the musculoskeletal system can adapt, then the world's your oyster. You can really then say, okay, now I'm ready to kind of advance things. I'm at a level that my body can handle.
Consistency is king.
Indeed. And that's the way our body adapts. Frequent exposure is what it likes, but done in an adaptable way. So it likes when you're doing this regular routine. It just got to be at a way that it can recover from. So you're not doing too much too soon. That way you're stimulating those genes every time you go out. And of course, the genes are saying, hey, if you're going to do this to me, when I replace the cells, because we're always replacing millions of cells in our body, even as we're sitting here, we've already replaced millions of cells. It will replace them with cells that are better able to handle what you've asked it to do. So you're replacing yourself over and over and over again. You're going to replace yourself with a faster you, a fitter you. And if you keep training, you'll replace that faster, fitter you with an even faster and even fitter you. And that's the process of training. So if we can have that consistency and imagine what you could be like in 6 months or a year or 2 years. And you see that in people, right? We hear these stories, miraculous sort of changes in what people are able to do. They go from very unfit to these amazing performances just from that consistency.
So what about warm up and flexibility, mobility? Like, are those things that are important, and at what phase are they important? Like maybe if you're a new runner and you're only doing a small amount of running, is it important to those folks? Or is it important only to those who kind of are running, say 20, 30 miles a week or 50 miles a week? And, what kinds of routines might you recommend for that?
Yeah, I think when you start, what you have to recognize is to go from sort of a cold body, a not warmed up body, to exercising. That's a big transition. So that's why if you watch pro runners and really good runners, their warm-ups are they start runs very slowly relative to what they're going to be running, sort of average pace for that workout. So they naturally are starting very easy for usually 3, 5, or 10 minutes. Let that body warm up, and then they almost let the pace come to them. So instead of forcing themselves to run fast, they start very easy, and then all of a sudden it just sort of comes naturally. So when I'm working with new runners, I say, let's not worry about the activity, how fast you're going in the beginning. Let's actually start real conservative, where you can really control your breath. You're not getting out of breath. Let's do that for 3 or 5 minutes. Then we know the muscles now are bathed in oxygen. They're bathed in warm blood. They're really primed to be able to perform. We're not sort of running too hard on cold legs, if you will. So that warm up can just be part of your exercise routine as you kind of build into it. And then I love the idea of doing mobility, kind of stretching like things. We usually say mobility now because stretching's evolved over time to where you're moving your body through small ranges of motion. And the reason I like that is that it's a kind of a diagnostic tool for that musculoskeletal system, because the injury cycle is usually tightness, ache, pain, injured. That's the process. So when you do mobility, particularly after when you're all kind of warmed up from your exercise, what essentially you're doing is you're saying, am I finding any areas that are tight? If that's the case, again, that's a clue. Your musculoskeletal system is not adapting as fast. You need to control your training. And of course, the movements, the active isolated flexibility. That's something people can Google, active isolated flexibility. Those are wonderful, sort of a diagnostic routine that you can go through to help keep those injuries at bay. If you start easy and kind of ease into runs, and then you do the mobility after the runs, you'll be amazed at how you catch any of this sort of pre-injuries before they advance into something that is an ache or a pain or an injury. So it's very easy to do, and it really makes you feel better once you're done. And of course, most of us, we sit at the computer, and particularly during this time, right? A lot of people have gone from their regular work environment to sitting a lot more, maybe sitting in a different chair. You see people hunched over the dining room table now at their makeshift home office. So that mobility can really help them sort of free up their body from sort of the modern day life.
I notice when I sit a lot and then I go for a run, I get all sorts of like weird crampy things going on. Like my hamstrings are just not happy. My glutes, I can feel like they're just not doing anything, like they're not firing like they're supposed to. And that's that stark reminder when I go out for one of those runs, I start getting crampy in my hamstrings. It's like, all right, you got to start focusing on, the mobility stuff and some foam rolling and things maybe.
Definitely. I think a lot, as you talk to experienced runners, you start to learn they spend a lot of time tending to their body. So they're asking a lot of it when you go out to run, and that tending to it, taking care of it with things like mobility, foam rolling, massage, all of those sort of self-therapy things that you can do really make a big difference long term in your overall health. And then, of course, your ability to perform in your sport.
What about so on the polarization of training? Like I guess it's typically if you're a more intermediate or advanced runner, you're going to start thinking about adding workouts, right? Like harder intensities into your training. So um, do you find that you have a lot of runners who come to you that say that they aren't polarizing, or maybe that you recognize that they aren't polarizing, and that it makes sense to incorporate some of these hard efforts? Is that something that you see, mistakes that people make?
We see that a lot, particularly with those sort of intermediate advanced runners, the experienced runners, they've been training for a while. They settle into a routine that eventually becomes stale. So you might see that they go to the track on Tuesdays with their running group and they do a speed workout. And then they get together with their buddies on Thursday and they do sort of a medium hard, what we call a tempo run on Thursday. And they do a long run on the weekend. And they kind of repeat that across the year. And what you see, of course, is that once you introduce any sort of more intense training, you will see a big jump in fitness, right? You're suddenly challenging your body in a new way. But over time, just like anything in fitness, if you do the same thing for too long, the body adapts and then it kind of plateaus. So what we see, they come to us because they say, wow, I was running better and better. I was setting new personal bests in all of my races. And then suddenly it was like it stopped. And they were finding it very difficult to get fitter and faster. And what we recognize is, well, it's because you've been doing the same thing for too long. We need to mix up the training a little bit. We need to add some differences. We need to stimulate your body and mind in different ways so you get another jump in fitness. So that's why as you schedule out your training, you need to think about, am I going to do this type of training for too long? And so as you get into more and more intense workouts, those you usually only do for a short period of time, maybe 4, 6, 8 weeks, and then you'll kind of move away from that type of training, rest that system, and then you can come back to it later. But those athletes that will do 3 months, 4 months, 5 months of that routine of sort of a speed workout on Tuesday, tempo Thursday, long run on the weekend, we see that that is a wonderful way to reach a plateau. And most of us don't want to reach that plateau. We want to keep our fitness building. And that's where this idea of polarization or periodization or moving from one focus in your training to a different focus, that really works quite well for the body and mind, because it kind of does like that. It's like that P90X muscle confusion. Do you remember that from a few years ago?
Yeah.
That's what the body likes. It likes routine, but it also likes that you're giving a little bit different stimulus. So you can know if you did the same route all the time, that could become boring. But if you're like suddenly went on an awesome trail run, that would like rejuvenate your brain and your body, right? So I think having some periodization or some way to kind of mix up your training is a really good idea. Kind of that variety is the spice of life is important in training as well.
Definitely. 2013, that was me with the plateau. I was excited to find that, not like I kind of discovered through hiring a coach, actually, that I had been just doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting to get better, and it just wasn't working. And then he helped me periodize and polarize my training, and all of a sudden I had this big surge in fitness and overall ability. It was very exciting.
Yeah, I love it when an athlete comes that way because I know, oh, I can fix this easily. We'll just change this up and get a big boost in performance. So, and of course they love it too, right? Because they were kind of felt like they were hitting, head against the wall, and then suddenly they're able to have a breakthrough. And then we start to learn, okay, what led to that and how can we avoid that in the future? And we might be able to learn, okay, you can do only this type of training for only so long before we need to move away from that. Otherwise, the body will plateau. It becomes accustomed to that activity and has some kind of like burnout in it, that it's not as excited. It won't perform as well. Give it a different activity, and then suddenly it'll really boost their fitness.
It's that low hanging fruit for those athletes. speaking of fruit, move on to nutrition here. What mistakes do you see athletes making either in their daily diet or from a sports nutrition standpoint?
I think in the beginning with new runners, they try to eat like pro athletes. So they really shift to eating a lot, eating maybe a lot more carbohydrates because they hear a high carbohydrate diet is what you need to be a runner. But they're not exercising at very high loads yet. And so they are sort of over consuming things that particularly processed carbohydrates, which we sort of abundance of those around, right? And so that way they don't lose the weight they want because they're just consuming too many carbohydrates and they're not burning them off. It's only once you start to get to higher training loads or intense training loads that you realize, oh, I've burned through my carbohydrate stores. I may need to add more of that into my diet. So when I work with new runners, I say, hey, we're actually going to work toward just a regular, good, healthy diet. We're going to clean up the diet. We're going to get rid of all those things you shouldn't eat. Maybe we'll only have those on special occasions. We'll try to eat closer to the earth, things that look a lot more like they are in nature. That'll serve you well, very well in the beginning. And then as you start to ramp up, as you go longer and or faster, and you get into those kind of workouts that we've talked about, you have a greater carbohydrate need. Now we need to feed that. That way we can start introducing maybe some of the more traditional things that you hear from endurance athletes where they're eating a lot more carbohydrate. Again, we're trying to get them to eat more high quality carbohydrate and avoid kind of the fast acting sugar, that bomb that we seem to be overloaded with in our culture, at least right now. So it's really a balance of thinking about, I just want to eat really, really healthy. And then I want to make sure I'm not overeating the things that can lead me to not achieve either my fitness goals or my performance goals or my weight loss goals. And that's typically too much of that fast acting kind of processed carbohydrates. Really what I find is if you just focus on cleaning up your diet, you'll lose a lot of weight, you'll perform better, you'll feel better, and then you'll start to learn, okay, this run, I actually needed more fuel for this run. It didn't go as well. Next time I'll add more fuel to that. Or, oh, I really need to refuel after the run because I am burning through more of my stores. And that's what you see from the really accomplished athletes, is that they kind of have this periodization of their nutrition. So on the days they're not exercising that hard, they have a little bit, they eat less and it's less carbohydrate focused. And then once they have the big activity, the big day, whether it's long or fast, sort of the dinner the night before, and then after that workout, they're focused more on making sure their carbohydrates are there. So again, you have to experiment a little bit, but I think we're finding that if you can just clean up your diet and then sort of modulate your carbohydrate intake around your big days, you can achieve those health goals, the weight loss goals or fitness goals you have, and then you'll also perform better. Obviously, Generation UCan, where you work, is a perfect example of, okay, I need more carbohydrates for this activity, but I want something that's slow acting. I don't want a fast sugar bomb because that's not as healthy for us as more slow acting. So you can use Generation UCan before and after workouts, and boom, you've got your more carbohydrate to fuel that longer or intense workout.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you mentioned that sort of stable energy, and one of the reasons why I came to UCan in the first place was because it's so easy on the stomach. Mm-hmm. So I always found in my runs that I just couldn't take in anything within several hours before my runs, especially if they were going to be harder runs or in the heat, when it's really difficult to kind of let that stomach sit properly and execute the workout that you're trying to do. And so for me, having UCan before my runs, something that's so easy on the stomach, it clears the stomach really, really quickly. I wouldn't have any of that stomach upset. So it's like one of the only things I can actually consume within, 20 minutes of my run, or even, or if maybe it's usually a little bit longer, maybe like 30 to 45 minutes before my run. And then I've got all the energy I need for something up to, 2.5 hours on just a preload essentially with the UCan.
Yeah, been a great solution for a lot of my athletes as well, because they suffered the same thing. They just couldn't consume the gels and the sports drinks and all that. It was too sugary. It's almost like a kid on Halloween night. They're so excited and they love it in the beginning. And then about an hour later, they're like, oh man, my stomach, it just can't tolerate this. So that's why I think a lot of athletes, you see them moving away from the fast acting carbohydrates so often. and they're really having more frequently slower acting carbohydrates. That's what's their primary fuel that they're using. They may still have some fast acting toward the end of like a marathon, and they may take a gel or something toward the end, but they're really noticing my gut just cannot handle as much of the fast acting sugars. So moving to that, and of course we know from a health standpoint that's really good. It keeps your insulin level from spiking so much. That's really important for health overall. So there's a whole metabolic benefit to kind of eating clean, keeping your fast acting carbohydrates under control, and thinking more about that slow acting steady energy.
Yeah. So now I want to move on to the COVID, the scenario that we're in right now, and touch a bit on how do you stay motivated and how do you avoid like losing a routine, or how do you establish a good routine given this environment that we're in? Like races have been canceled. I've got nothing to train for. Like, you hear some people talking about that. And, do you have any tips? Let's start with on the motivation end of things. Do you have tips for my waning motivation during COVID?
Yeah, it's been a big challenge for everybody, right? Because certainly more experienced runners are really goal driven. And so the race is often that end result. That's the goal that they want to get to. And, in the spring, it was stressful because we were worried, are the races going to get canceled? And then they got canceled, and it was like, okay, well, now we're not stressed. We'll just move to sort of more base or preparatory type workouts, and then we'll get ready for the races in the fall since they got moved to the fall. And now here we are in the fall and the races aren't happening. So, okay, what do I do now? What we've had success with is actually moving people to race training plans. So they will actually train for a race and do a virtual race or a time trial or some end performance result, so that they aren't just left out there training adrift. They don't seem to have a focus. They aren't doing sort of serious workouts, if you will, which we didn't want to do for month after month. But now it's kind of like, okay, we need to go away from just our base training or hill phase, and we really do need to have some performance. And as people are getting more and more comfortable with time trials and virtual races and challenging themselves outside of that race environment, I think they're starting to really like it. I think they're liking that challenge of, okay, it is really just me versus me. I don't have that external. And now I'm getting better at learning myself and being able to perform. So I would say one of the things, if you are suffering from motivation, is jump into a race plan. Even if it's a 5K or 10K that won't happen in an actual race, start that plan, because then you'll see those more exciting workouts that are in your training schedule, as opposed to just going out 3 or 4 or 5 times a week and doing your regular run. Now it's like, oh, okay, on Wednesday, I have this type of workout. That introduces something that kind of can get your brain excited. And we're also lucky now that we have so many online capabilities to connect with other people. So for a lot of our runners, they're so used to meeting up with their running group, and now they can't do that. So we're seeing them in our online platform that we have. There's sort of a social component, and they're really connecting that way to share about their running. And they talk about, man, it was really hard to get out the door this week. It was really tough. I'm just proud that I did. It's like, me too kind of thing. So I think sharing, having a race plan, even if there's no race, moving to something that can kind of divert your attention from boredom is really important.
I just shared Greg's running coaching website. It's McMillanrunning.com. And that's a great place that Greg was just referring to, that has a whole bunch of resources. So it's just, everything from community to resources to coaching to, there's a whole bunch of good stuff on there. So definitely worth checking that out. So as far as, and one other thing I wanted to mention is that during this time, it's something that I've noticed a lot of people doing is, even if there's no virtual race or no races that they're doing, people have been setting these just fun challenges for themselves. And it's all dependent on their ability. If you're a newer runner, or it might be challenging yourself to do your longest run ever, which is maybe 5 miles, or maybe it's 3 miles, maybe it's a 5K, maybe it's 10 miles, or maybe it's something longer. Maybe it's running a marathon, which you've never done before. Maybe it's running from like point A to point B in a one-way direction, or like just doing a challenge where you're doing a running streak, or like there's all sorts of just fun things that people have challenged themselves to during this time that have been, I think, keeping them very motivated, because I see them and talk to them, and they seem very excited about the training that they're doing. Whereas other people kind of who maybe don't have those sort of fun experiences and adventures set up for themselves, they don't seem to be quite as engaged.
Yeah, you got to recognize that, right? You got to recognize when, wow, I'm losing motivation. I'm not as excited. And so you have to be proactive and try something like that. Try a different route, run in a different place, try a different event, whatever it is, mix it up. And that keeps that motivation going. You just need to buy some time, right? Because motivation isn't low forever. It kind of, you have this cycle of I'm really motivated and then I'm less motivated. So you just need to buy enough time to live through those low motivation periods, and then it will come back. So you develop strategies for that. And exactly what you described are wonderful strategies. And everybody's a little bit different, what kind of gets them excited again. Find something and do it, because again, you're going to buy that time to get through that low motivation period, and then you'll find your motivation kind of coming back. That's what we're doing a lot in life, right? We're adapting. And so that is another example of look at the situation, accept it, and then figure out how you can adapt so that you can make it better for yourself.
Now, one more question before we open it up to Q&A from everybody in the audience. I've heard you talk about this period right now as instead of thinking about it negatively, thinking about it instead as a period of opportunity. So what are some of these opportunities, and tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's been interesting to see some of the positives that have come from this. I've seen several actually. The first is, as I mentioned before, I think people really starting to get in tune with their own effort levels and learning how to kind of modulate their effort, learning, kind of getting in touch with their own inner GPS instead of just always the GPS on your watch. So that better understanding of themselves, that's been wonderful. We have a lot of athletes that are discovering that they can work on their bodies they didn't have time to do before. So they're doing more of the mobility work, the core, the strength. They're kind of experimenting with almost taking care of themselves that they hadn't been able to do before. They're building a more durable body for when they do sort of advance back to the training that they had done before, maybe getting ready for that marathon. They'll be more prepared for that. So that's been interesting as well, kind of a silver lining coming out of it. And again, that idea that you can adapt and figure it out is something that will be powerful in the future, because if we remember back to before this, you always had those challenges of scheduling, of are you going to get out the door or not, or can you fit this in? And this is really showing people that they can adapt and they can make the best of the situation. And I think coming out of it, those will be a few things that people will really rely back on, that, hey, I can push myself mentally more than I was before. I was so focused on my time, and now I'm able to perform better, or I'm building a better body. I'm seeing the difference that better sleep or more prehab or better nutrition can make for my performance.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people using this opportunity, and something that I've been talking a lot to about the people that I engage with on a day-to-day basis as the director of UCan's endurance business, is that now with no races and with, you know, so much of a focus on sort of almost an inward focus, right? Like you're talking about, this inward kind of, you know, being in tune with yourself, is to learn new things and experiment with new things. And so right now is the perfect opportunity, where a lot of the time we're talking to people in you know, it's a week before race day, or they're right in the heart of their race season, and they don't want to try anything new, but now is the perfect time to be trying something new. So if you haven't tried UCan before, now is the perfect time to give it a try. And to give you a little snapshot of like what it is before we'd open it up to Q&A, I see a couple questions trickling in. So keep those coming, because we'll come in right back to those in just a second. For anybody who isn't familiar with what UCan is, it's not just another sports nutrition company, honestly. Most sports nutrition is underlied by simple sugars, which are like your fructose and your glucose, or maltodextrin, which is, as Greg has mentioned on a couple of occasions, are your fast-acting carbs, your sort of spike and crash type of profile. The carbohydrate that's in UCan's products is not simple sugars or maltodextrin. It's called superstarch, and it provides a very steady release of energy over a long period of time. That's because this molecule is a massive molecule. It's a very complex carbohydrate that releases energy at almost like a time-release source of energy. That's very, very easy on the stomach. So it has these kind of unique features that drew me to the brand back in 2014, when I was experiencing the GI distress and the like energy lulls during my Ironman performances. And it cured it for me, because it is so different. So if you want to give it a shot, I just posted in the chat a link to the UCan page on the Sports Basement site. So they have a bunch of the UCan products on there that you can pick up and give it a try. If you do have any questions, I'm also going to put in my email address here. If you have any questions about, what should I get, or how do I use it, or anything like that, or if you run into any problems at all, you can always ask me any of those questions. And I also put into the chat a link to Greg McMillan's mobility routine. It's called Magic Mobility, and it's excellent. We've talked about mobility a couple of times during this talk, and you can also use code SPORTSBASEMENT for $5 off on that. So another thing that you could implement that's maybe new that you haven't tried before, that could really help you in terms of preventing injuries and things. So I'm going to go to some of the questions that we have here from the audience. The first question is from Mike, and he asks, how often do you replace your running shoes?
Most runners find that between 300 and 500 miles is a good time for them to start looking for that next running shoe. It can vary a little bit based on the runner and where you run. So if you're running on soft trails and you're a really light runner and you're not compressing that shoe as much, then you might be able to extend that number of miles. If you're a heavier runner and you're running on asphalt or concrete every day, then that midsole will break down earlier. But that 300 to 500 mile range is certainly kind of a good guideline. The worst thing you want to do is keep running in a shoe and get injured. So running is pretty cheap relative to most other sports. So getting another pair of shoe, or actually having multiple pairs that you're rotating through, is a great way to kind of keep injuries at bay. And it's always fun to kind of get a new pair of shoes anyway. So I think that 300 to 500 is a good rule.
It feels great getting a new pair of shoes, because I know I've taken some shoes way too far. I think I've had at least one pair, maybe even two pairs that I've taken up to 1,000 miles, and that was an awful idea. They felt like bricks on my feet, and I noticed I was starting to get injured, and all these like little niggles would start popping up in my knees and my Achilles and everything. And then I got the new pair of shoes, and it felt like I was just running on clouds. It felt so great. So definitely good advice there, 300 to 500 miles. And ever since those days back years ago, I've stuck to that 500 miles max, because it really does make a difference. Mm-hmm. Now, what are the best recovery strategies? This is from Judith. What are the best recovery strategies when you suffer an injury? Is resting the only way to recover?
Certainly not. I think we now know that just taking time off, you don't have to do that. Certainly it will heal by taking time off, but what you're really trying to do is accelerate the recovery. You're trying to get better faster. Certainly you need to see your doctor, therapist, or somebody to get a correct diagnosis and get sort of treatment during that early phase. But what we try to do is say, okay, what activity can you be doing that is not causing the injury any more stress or delaying the healing? So if you have an injured foot, for example, and running puts a lot of stress on it, then you probably could go and swim, or you could go and maybe even do the elliptical, which is body weight, but it's less pounding than running. Or you could just go for a walk. Maybe it hurts you when you run, but it doesn't hurt when you walk. You can stay active. That does a few things. Number one, it encourages blood flow. So the healing of tissues typically comes from blood flow. You want to be taking away all the damaged material and putting in the new good stuff. And then also it continues you on that routine. We talked about a sustainable routine. I know I'm pretty grumpy if I don't do my normal routine. So you like to have that routine. And then it also keeps that fitness from declining too much. So we typically go, okay, what's the least weight bearing and the least stressful on that tissue in the beginning? And then we slowly build back in more and more weight bearing and more activity like. So for a runner, it might be, okay, in the beginning, we'd have to do aqua jogging, which is no weight bearing. And then we would move to the elliptical, and then we might start to intersperse some walking with the elliptical. And then suddenly it's elliptical and a short run or run walk. And then eventually kind of ease back into full training. So I would encourage you to not just rest completely, but feel like you're actively involved in that treatment. You can obviously do some home treatment, and your therapist will tell you, hey, do this from its icing and compression and all those normal things. But I'm a big fan of let's keep active in a way that doesn't interfere with the healing process, but can kind of keep your mind engaged with your training and your goals.
Well, Ian's got a question for everybody. Do you recommend strength training in conjunction with run training for longevity and injury prevention?
Yeah, most runners now are doing some form of resistance training, and it can vary a lot from the runner to runner. Some people are doing, who are kind of averse to like going to the gym, they're doing weight bearing things. They're doing very simple exercises that can make a big difference in their running. And then you have some people that really enjoy going to the gym and they like to do the machines and they'll just go circle through all the machines. Other people like more CrossFit, or some people like Olympic weightlifting, and some people like more circuits and boot camp kinds of things. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but I think if you're continuing to work on your body, you are going to be asking it, in running at least, to land, 1,500 times, jumping from foot to foot every mile. That's a lot of pounding, 2.5 to 3 times your body weight. So doing some strength training in conjunction with your running, that's what we see with all of the pro runners now. They're beginning to do, a little bit of this resistance training. Again, you got to figure out what works for you, what you like, and the body will kind of tell you if you're doing too much. But most everybody's doing a little bit of resistance training now.
I learned it the hard way back in 2012. I was doing a whole bunch of training without any strength training in 2011, 2012. I started getting a bunch of imbalances and muscle weaknesses, especially in my glutes because we sit so much. Mm-hmm. And then it was in 2012, it was like I just had injuries like crazy, just in my knees and Achilles and my glutes, like my hip area. I was like, everything just kept popping up and it stopped me from being able to run consistently. So finally, it was in 2012, 2013 that I started to do a lot of consistent strength training, especially kind of single leg things to try to work out on those imbalances and those weaknesses. And all of a sudden the injuries after, it took a few weeks at least, but after, a month or two, all those injuries just started going away. It's like magic.
Yeah, it just takes a little bit too. You don't have to become an Olympic weightlifter to do it in our sport. You just need a little bit and can go a long way.
Got another question here. A lot of good questions. This is Casey, and Casey's question is piggybacking the strength training question. Any suggestions for strength routines when weights are hard to come by, even at Sports Basement?
Yeah, certainly at McMillanRunning.com, we have multiple routines that are very low equipment. So we try to build them so that you don't have to have all of that equipment. We have Strength and Stride, which requires really just like a stretchy band and a foam roller and a bench, and you can do all of those kind of body weight driven. Marathon legs is one where we don't use any equipment with no weights or anything like that. It's all body weight driven, but it gives you the benefits, the legs of somebody who runs mega miles without having to do that, because it's all body weight and eccentric loading. So there's lots of different activities, simple things too. Think back to like just regular calisthenics, things that at least at my age, when we used to do in PE class, where we were doing jumping jacks and lunges and all sorts of different squats, all these things just with our body weight. If you can do that and you just a little bit, can tide you over until maybe the gym opens again and you'll be able to get to those weights.
When fatigued, this is from Mary, when fatigued during a run, is it better to push through it or stop or walk for a little bit and then restart running?
I think if you mean fatigue, like you're getting out of breath, so you've lost your breath, you're heavy breathing, you're slowing down quite a bit. If that's what you mean by fatigue, I think that's a great chance to have a walk break, recover your breath, and start again. You don't want to be getting completely out of breath so much that you're going so slowly. So we want to make sure we maintain the quality of your session, and the quality will be determined by that ability to kind of control your breath for the full duration. So I always tell people, hey, if you're starting to get out of breath, slow down. And that may be just running slower, but it could also mean taking a walk break so you recover your breath. You always want that breath to kind of be conversational on the bulk of your run, something where you could carry on a conversation. You're not breathing so fast that you can't. So if that's the type of fatigue that you're talking about, and I assume that it is, then I think that's a great chance to take that break. Otherwise, you're just going to go so slowly that the quality of the workout, it'll kind of mentally defeat you as well. I'd rather you be finishing runs feeling like, oh, I could have gone a little faster, a little farther. That's a great way to finish a run. That sets you up for the next one.
Got a question here from Rebecca. Do you recommend buying used running shoes? Just bought 2 lightly used pairs at the last Sports Basement tier sale.
Yeah, before I would have said no, that would be crazy. But I think given that almost all retailers like Sports Basement have such a wonderful return policy. They kind of allow you to go out and experiment. And it only takes a few runs for this shoe works for me or doesn't. So those used running shoes are they're basically new shoes that have just had a few runs in them. That makes it, you can feel more comfortable purchasing those shoes. Again, I feel like, and I have a video on my YouTube channel, the 3 steps to buying a running shoe, exactly what you should do in trying to pick out that shoe. You'll know pretty quickly if that shoe is the right one for you or if it's been beat up too much. But I don't think most retailers are selling shoes that they feel wouldn't be appropriate for you. They're usually just very lightly used during that period that they let you try them, and then they're returned because they didn't work for that particular runner.
Learned something new there. I didn't know that most of the retailers these days had such a policy like that and sold lightly used shoes. I mean, that sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful because you just don't know in the store always if that's going to work for you. So it's nice that they let you kind of get out in the real world, see what it's like in its natural habitat. And then if it doesn't work, you're able to bring it back. And it does take sometimes 2 or 3 runs before you really know if that shoe's going to work for you.
Yoga. Do you recommend yoga? How does yoga support running?
Yeah, I think yoga is really interesting because it kind of gets 2 components of recovery and fitness. So if we talk about yoga, you need to almost be specific of which type of yoga, because there can be very intense yoga, but I assume you're talking about more of the restorative type yoga. The benefits of it for runner, again, as you exercise, one of the things that happens is your connective tissue gets stiffer, and that's so that you get more spring in your body. So it's using the natural spring that's set up in your musculoskeletal system, but that can go too far and you can get too tight, as I explained before. Yoga after runs or in a warm environment is really nice to be able to work through and keep that stiffening from becoming too much, so you maintain that range of motion that you need. Secondly, it's really great mentally, right? It's a wonderful way to recover. We have a yoga recovery routine for runners on our website, and it is amazing when athletes do it consistently how much fresher they feel going into their upcoming training. I think partly because their mind kind of got cleared and calmed, and they're more prepared for that next training session.
I have a question. Thank you for that question, Kelly. And we have a question here from Mark, and he asks, what helps to prevent muscle atrophy for one who is 63 years old?
Strength training. I mean, we know if you keep working that muscle, you can hold on to it for longer. It's sort of that use it or lose it thing is what we've learned in aging. And it's really changed the thought about aging, right? It used to be, oh, there's nothing you can do about it. This is all going to happen to you. But now we see these remarkable athletes performing so well in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even 100s. And most of those athletes, what they've been doing is they've stayed active. They continue to work those muscles. If you work that muscle, it has a higher likelihood of staying. If you don't work it, it will atrophy. So I would say develop a consistent routine where you're doing some resistance training. That'll help hold on to that muscle, your muscle.
Great. Now, everybody, looks like we've gone through I think all the questions or most of the questions here. If you have more questions, feel free to throw them in. We have about 8 minutes left or so before we want to close out, and we do want to make sure we get in the raffle this evening. So we're going to be raffling off 3 boxes of UCan bars, and there are new bars which we just launched in April. One of the flavors is the salted peanut butter, and the other flavor is chocolate almond butter, and they've both been big hits. They're excellent as snacks throughout the day. They could be great as a pre-run bar that you would eat, maybe a half hour beforehand as a snack to get you that energy to get you out the door. And we're going to be raffling off 3 boxes of it to 3 separate lucky winners. So Ian's going to help me with that raffle, but I'm going to give maybe another minute before we do that so that people can chime in with any of their last minute questions that they have. And so everybody knows the different formats of what we have at UCan. It's in bars, and the bars do have the super starch that I talked about before, which is that carbohydrate, that unique carbohydrate that gives you long-lasting energy. We also have it in powder format. And then there's UCan Hydrate, which is an electrolyte replenishment drink that does not have the super starch, doesn't have energy, it has 0 calories. It's a clean electrolyte source. It's delicious, just natural flavor and electrolytes. All right, we've got one extra question here from Mary. So don't run if muscles are tight or sore.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean that what you're doing is using mobility after runs so that you're limiting or minimizing the tightness or the soreness. So a little bit of tightness, a little bit of soreness is just your body saying, hey, I need more mobility work. Don't push me too hard. It doesn't mean don't exercise. It just means be careful with me and continue to do those mobility routines. You shouldn't be sore for long periods of time. Certainly you may have an activity or a session that you get a little bit sore from, but it shouldn't last too long. You're able to, if you use the mobility routines and be gentle with your body, it should freshen up and not be tight and sore anymore.
Great. And somebody threw in one more question. Maybe we'll get that one. We have a little bit more time. How does one transition from road to trail running?
Well, it's easy, right? Just go out and run. The main difference is you just have to be more careful and you have to go slower. So if you're really data driven, you like to look at your watch, you're concerned about your pace or your heart rate, just know that your effort may be higher, your pace may be slower, your heart rate may be higher when you're on the trails. And then over time, you'll develop better and better trail running skills. And so, you know, running on trails is obviously a more uneven surface. There can be rocks and roots and that sort of thing. So you just take your time, don't risk anything. And over a few runs, you'll start to get better and better and more comfortable at running on trails. But it doesn't take anything specific. Just get out there, explore a new trail and learn, be open to experimenting. And you'll find, oh, up these hills, this technique works for me, or downhill, this technique works for me, or, whoa, I need to go very careful when it's very technical and lots of rocks because I could trip and fall. So just get out there and explore. And over time, you'll learn more and more about yourself on the trails.
Awesome. Ian, can you help me pull the raffle winners?
Gladly. So these are kind of randomly going to be selected real quick here from the participant list. And first winner is going to be Kelly Mendoza.
All right, Kelly Mendoza. So I'm punching it into the chat here to make sure we've got a record of it. So Kelly, oh, there we go. She just said yay. So,
yay, we like that. Okay.
Make sure you chat your email address to me so that I can coordinate with you and get your mailing address and all that so that I can get that box of bars to you. And let me know which flavor you'd like too. Same thing for the other two people that we're going to pull here. Ian, what's our next winner?
Second winner is going to be Marcos.
Marcos. How do you spell that?
Markos.
Marcos. There we go. All right. So Marcos, make sure you chat me. Send me your email address. Excellent. I just got Kelly. Thank you for your email address.
Great. And then the third winner will be Bernadette Padagno.
Bernadette, congratulations. Whoops. I just privately chatted someone. Bernadette's name.
Surprise.
All right, there we go. So those are the three winners.
Bernadette.
Kelly and Bernadette. There we go. Just got Marcos's email address. Good. I'm glad I'm getting these now because I want to make sure you guys get your prizes. So for anybody who didn't get didn't win one of the boxes of UCan bars, or I guess if you did and you want to pick up some extra UCan, I'm going to chat that link into here one more time. So this is the UCan page on the Sports Basement site if anybody's interested in picking anything up. And let's see. Hey, we got 3 more minutes. We've got the raffle prizes done. We're going to be closing out in just a second. And we had one other question that we can go back to if that's all right. It's from Paula. How do you adjust for mental stress from non-running in your training? Greg?
That's a great question. You need to have a strategy for when life gets in the way and you're going into a workout and you're just not mentally prepared. Typically what we're saying to athletes is, number one, go into that workout because usually you want to do it, right? Because you'll relieve some of that mental stress by doing your workout. But just make sure it's shorter and less intense. Respect the mental stress and use that workout, that run walk, or that walk as a way to sort of de-stress. So we're not trying to add stress with that workout. We're trying to de-stress. Now, if you have a big workout, something important like a speed workout or a tempo run or a long run, then what you would say is, I'm not mentally prepared to give my best on this important day. So shift it, move it to the next day, move it to next week, or just skip it in your training plan. I'm a big fan of, if you're compromised going into a really important run or workout, then make sure you adjust that workout. Typically, we would say, oh, let's just move it to another day where you are more prepared. Even if you have to get it in, it can only fit in on that day, but I'm stressed or I'm underfueled, then think about, I'm going to do the minimum, the slowest end of the pace range, the lowest volume for that, and then pat yourself on the back and say, I got it in, well done. So I think it's really important that, like you brought up, that we have to respect the mental stress and not try to add another physical stress on top of that. And so make sure that physical stress and kind of mental stress of the workout is in accord with how much other stress you have in your life, and not add another stress that can continue that negativity for you.
Great. It's got some great comments coming in. I'm glad you're all enjoying the talk and learning something from Greg, because he is an absolute wealth of knowledge. I mean, this is just a tiny little kernel of what Greg's got going on in his brain there. But as you can tell, we are definitely big lovers of running, and this is fantastic to be able to talk about this. As for me, it's my living, and for Greg, and this is just fantastic to be able to enjoy this time with the community and hopefully answer some of the questions that you guys all had. So thank you to you, Greg, for all of your knowledge, for your time this evening. And thank you to Ian for helping put this together and hosting this awesome event, this live event, so that we could cater to everybody's questions. So thank you both very much.
Of course, and just kind of close out here. Again, really appreciate both of you taking the time, and everybody for attending. Just a friendly reminder that I will send everybody that is in attendance a follow-up email tomorrow with a bit of information regarding Greg's Magic Mobility Program, special discount code for you, as well as another reminder about where you can find UCan at Sports Basement. We are all 10 locations are open safely, hoping to see you guys in store soon. Just a reminder, we do have Outside In happening again next week. It's going to be how to properly fit your backpack for that next backpacking trip. So thank you all for tuning in. We really appreciate the time and valuable input from you, Greg, and thank you for moderating. Matt, of course, thanks all for attending, and we'll be in touch tomorrow. Enjoy the evening.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.